Today we are looking at Genesis chapters 6 through 11. Now, if you grew up in Sunday school, you might be familiar with the story of Noah, but I feel like there's some very interesting details in this story that continue our video from last time, which I'll add a banner to, so that hopefully if you're watching this video, you've already watched that one, because we are going through the Bible. And so we started with Genesis 1 to 5, now we're doing 6 to 11. So starting in chapter 6, we're introduced to Noah as a righteous man. Now, there's very few people in the Bible who are referred to as righteous. Actually, you can count them all on one hand, right? You have Noah, and then you have Abraham, who kind of has to work a little bit to get to a place where he's considered righteous. Then you have Job, and you have Jesus. And so you don't even need all of the fingers on one hand. It's just 4 people who are considered righteous in the Bible. Now, everyone is pursuing righteousness, but it's interesting that Noah is just this inherently righteous character. It's not something that we see a whole lot in the Bible. Like I said, with Abraham, he has to work towards it. Jesus is literally God. And Job is a whole other story that we'll have to get to at another point in time. And so Noah finds favor in the eyes of the Lord when everything else around him is falling apart. Humanity has become wicked. So we see this division from chapters 1 through 5, where the line of Cain goes towards wickedness and the line of Seth goes towards righteousness, leading us to Noah. And at this point, things are pretty unbalanced. Noah and his family are the only ones who are deemed righteous enough to save. And that's sad. And we're not the only ones who are sad, because in verse 6, it says that the Lord regretted that he made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. Now, that's a really, really tricky passage, because we then have to ask the question, did God make a mistake when he created humans? It says that he regretted it. It's right there. This is the New International Version. If you randomly just picked up a Bible, it'd probably be this translation. Now, not all translations have this, so I actually wanted to jump into the Hebrew for this to explore this word of regret a little bit more. Now, when we're looking at the outline of the biblical usage of this word, naham, it means to be sorry, to console oneself, repent, regret, comfort, or be comforted. It's used a lot, but it's actually not often translated as regret. And so regret might not be the best way to translate or to think about this word. A good word to replace it with might be empathy. God was very moved with emotion. He sees the state that humanity is in, and it makes him sad. He is empathizing because things are not the way that they're supposed to be. Humanity is hurting. And in his sorrow, he is comforting himself in this. And so he turns to Noah, this righteous character, who then is going to bring about the redemption of the human race. Does that remind you of anyone? If you're thinking of Jesus, then you would be right? Again, that's one of our 4 righteous people. So rather than focusing in on this passage and asking, did God make a mistake? Let's focus in a little more and say, well, what is God setting up here through Noah? In chapter 7, I think it's really interesting that we are seeing these patterns of 7 again that we talked about in the last video. Noah is told by God to take 7 pairs of every clean animal, 7 pairs of every kind of bird, and then 7 days from now, he's going to send rain. Now, something that happened in the creation narrative is God dispersed the water and brought up land. Now, in 7 days, that's going to be undone. The land will disappear because the water is going to rain down and cover the land. And so the story of Noah is undoing the creation that just happened. And then where we start to see the story connect forward to the story of the Israelites is that the water is going to come down for 40 days. And looking ahead to chapter 8, after 40 days, after the rain has stopped, there is still a waiting period. Almost like an exile, something that the Israelites experience before they're able to go into the promised land. You see, they leave Egypt and then they wander in the wilderness for 40 years because they're not too great at being faithful to God. But eventually, a covenant is made and a new generation is able to enter the promised land through the leadership of Joshua. After this period of 40 days of waiting, Noah sends out a bird to see if there's any dry land. It ends up coming back, no dry land. He waits 7 days, another iteration of this 7-day period. This time, the bird comes back with an olive branch. Noah waits 7 more days, sends it out, and the bird doesn't come back, showing that it found a suitable place to rest. So after these cycles of 7 again, we're almost seeing a recreation because the flood is going away, the land is appearing, and there is even life that is able to flourish. There's a tree somewhere out there and a bird living in that tree. And so creation is coming back full circle. And so we see this verse in chapter 9, verse 7. Be fruitful and increase in number, multiply on the earth and increase upon it. Does that remind you of the command given to Adam and Eve? It's almost the exact same thing. And God creates a covenant with Noah. Like I said, if you grew up in Sunday school, you probably know this part. Noah built an altar and he made a sacrifice and there was a rainbow. And God creates a covenant with Noah, but not just him, but also with his descendants. Similar to how God will eventually make a covenant with Abraham and with Moses and with Joshua, so that the people of Israel would have a place to live in the promised land. Chapter 10 then gives us what's called the Table of Nations, where Noah's sons then spread out and they have descendants who have descendants who have descendants who give us a lot of key names of places and people groups that we're going to read throughout the rest of the Bible. And in Genesis chapter 11, humanity has expanded to a point where they are now starting to drift back to where they were before. They are kind of repeating the same cycle of Adam and Eve, where they believe that they can become like God. And they are going to use their own power and their own achievement rather than living by God's faithfulness. And so we get this story where all the languages are mixed up, which also might be a convenient way to say, hey, maybe this is how all of these different nations got all of these different languages. And this narrative introduces us to 2 key names, Abraham and Babylon. And the name, the Tower of Babel, is actually kind of a Hebrew play on words, funny way of making fun of Babylon, saying, look at this great nation that is actually easily dismantled by the power of God. And Abraham's family actually comes out of Babylon in the opposite direction that Adam and Eve left Eden. And so we're now getting this visual imagery of Abraham moving us closer back to the ideal of how things were supposed to be. Just like Noah was righteous and Abraham will become righteous, it's moving humanity closer in that direction of the Eden ideal, where the rest of humanity, like we see in the Tower of Babel, is starting to drift again. So next time we are going to continue forward with the character of Abraham. And here's where things get a little more concrete. We see Abraham in a couple of different religions. We see that the lineage of Abraham leads us to the kings and eventually to Jesus. It's going to be great.